This edition of Mac Voices is supported by Take Control Books, the answers you need now from leading experts. Visit TakeControlBooks.com to find out what you can learn. And by Mac Voices Magazine, our free Flipboard magazine that brings you some of the best Mac, iPhone, and iPad productivity tips on the web. High in signal, low in noise, just like Mac Voices, Mac Voices Magazine includes information on how you can get more out of your Apple technology. Subscribe at MacVoices.com/magazine or search for Mac Voices Magazine on Flipboard. Welcome back to Mac Voices. This is the Talk of the Mac Community, and I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, the last time Victor Cajiao was here, he was here as a speaker at MacStock. We also talked to him about the TerraTech podcast. But this time, he's back with us to talk about a new project that has to do more with his musicianship than his technical acumen. Or maybe not. Maybe it's technical acumen and musicianship.
Yeah.
Victor, it's great to see you. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Chuck. Great to be back, as always, and great to be able to share a part of the story, which absolutely involves both sides of my brain, you know, the very creative side and the very geeky technical side. That's what I love about, you know, my musical journey. That's what it's about. That's what it's rooted at.
Yeah, now this interview is going to make good on a threat or promise we made, depending on how you look at it, at MacStock when we did just a short little talk with you about what you were talking about there, and talk about your new CD, which is entitled Surrender.
That's right. Yeah, I've been working on this CD for about a year. Actually started writing the music for it in 2011 with my partner, Joe Cristina. I want to make sure I give Joe props here because this is absolutely a 50-50 collaboration thing. Joe is a very well-known arranger, composer, and orchestrator here in the Orange County area. And so I've been friends with him for 42 years. And this album was a celebration of that 42-year friendship. We did a record back in 1995 called Resolve, which is still out there and available. So this is 20 years later, and where we're at both as human beings, as friends, and as musicians. And so this record was a celebration of all of that, and a celebration of what one can do today as an independent artist in producing music that involves wonderful players. You know, never forgetting the musicianship and the talent that they brought to the table that really makes what you guys hear out there, if you choose to go listen to the record, stream it for free, whatever, what you hear, yes, it's a representation of our composition chops and our technical abilities, but it's really this mirror of what these wonderful 17 musicians brought to the table.
So let's set a little background. A lot of people for this show know you more for the techie side, but your musician or musical interest and musical abilities go, as you said, way back to a first CD, but also plenty of things in between.
Plenty of things in between. I've been playing music since I was 14. I was a saxophonist, clarinetist. That's how I started. And I've been playing in rock and roll bands, you know, since the time I was 17 years old. Garage bands and all the way through nightclubs. I used to play 4 or 5 nights a week in nightclubs in an earlier life that hopefully none of you know me from, because it was crazy. And so yeah, I did a lot of recording. I did some session work in the 80s with an artist named Stacy Q that was a kind of a one-hit wonder. I did a little bit of soundtrack work at that time as well. And so, yes, it's always been part of my life. But when I decided to make a career out of the job that I just retired from, it kind of took the back seat. You know, I needed to feed the family. I wanted to have that retirement income. All of those things took priority over that music career for me, not for Joe. Joe has been a musician, composer all along. But for me, it took a back seat. So my retirement kind of re-triggered this thing that I've always had of wanting to fulfill that mission in a greater way, of being a musician, a working composer, an independent artist. And I had the perfect opportunity to be able to do that because I had, you know, what you need: time, a little bit of money saved up that my wife was nice enough to say, sure, go for it. And then the energy to be able to really attack this from the point of view of, gosh, I've always wanted to do this record with Joe, with this specific musicians. And we can talk about a little bit more about that because I went after a couple of musicians and a couple of people in the record in a very unique way that really made the foundation happen for me.
Folks, if any of you know Victor from that time in his life and you have pictures, I've got cash. So, you know.
Oh, there are pictures.
Oh, boy.
Sure.
Oh, boy. Okay. All right, folks, you chuck at MacVoices.com, please. Yeah, let's. I don't know. It sounds like we should start with the music side of this, as opposed to the geeky side. So, you had musicians in mind. You obviously had a particular project in mind, not just it's time to make a CD today. How did you go about approaching that? Was it just a matter of you and your partner laying down the idea and then finding the musicians to fit it, or were you bringing the musicians in and letting them contribute to the project?
Well, no, it all starts with Joe and I, having the compositional ideas and trading those back and forth pretty much online, to bring a little bit of technology into it, in things like Logic, and then a program that he uses from Avid that allows him to score music. And I'm sorry, I don't remember that name right now, but it will come to me. And so, he writes music on a computer, but he writes it on a score, the traditional way, not using a pencil, but using his keyboard and his mouse. He literally writes music that way. When I write music, I write with a little bit of keyboard knowledge that I have. I have enough to write with, and I write on my saxophone or an electronic wind instrument. Our music style of choice, I would call contemporary jazz, progressive jazz, but it hits upon a couple of other cylinders as well. Easy listening, but certainly not music just dumbed down at all. It's very orchestral in nature from that way. So we start sending each other back and forth this little seeds. It can be a 1-minute segment of an idea, and I might have that idea melodically, and I shoot that off as a MIDI file, musical instrument digital interface. This interface format has been around since the early 80s. And so he's able to take that very tiny MIDI file, they're less than a meg usually, and then put that into his system and maybe write the orchestration or the chords behind that. Shoot it back to me. I'm going now to Logic Pro 10, and I'm starting to put some of the virtual instruments that are very powerful inside that wonderful $200 program. I want a Rhodes keyboard. I want a real piano. We want strings here. We want this drum set. So all of that design starts to happen then in Logic, and slowly, the piece of music starts taking shape in a traditional form. How it starts, what's in the middle, what's in the second chorus, how it ends, slowly starts taking form in that way. And then by the time that probably this year, February came around, we had picked the 8 songs that we were going to do, and we had those songs inside of Logic in a project that was about 16 to 24 tracks. And a track, you guys, it's just an individual sound file of one instrument. There's a track for drums, there's a track for bass, there's a track for keyboards. This is the way music has been made for a very long time, since certainly the 70s, mid-60s. And so, but we're doing this with virtual instruments. At this point, there are no musicians involved, except Joe and I, of course. But we're trying to put into these demo something that the musicians are going to be able to play too, because eventually we're going to send these demos to the people we want to hire to play, to have them play it. And that kind of takes us to the next iteration. So technology plays a part all along the way. The discipline of things like backups. My goodness, I have more backups of this record than I know what to do with. It's my life's work. So all these things that we talk about in the Mac community that are so easy to do with our Macs, whether it happens to be the use of Logic, whether it happens to be our backup strategy, ChronoSync. Every time I would open a drive with that folder, ChronoSync would automatically do a backup to another drive because it has that capability to recognize if I plug in a drive because I was just outside of a recording session, I come home, the moment I plug in the drive, ChronoSync kicks up, backs it up to the cloud. So things like that absolutely play a part in all of this. And for me, that's hog heaven because I'm hitting on both sides of the brain. So that's kind of the preparation for it. And next we had to, hire musicians. And in an ideal situation, I would love to go inside a huge recording studio and record with 10 or 12 musicians at a time. But that's just cost prohibitive because large recording studios like that are hard to find now. And when you do find them, $600 to $800 a day is about the normal charge. So that was going to be cost prohibitive. So we had to take what a lot of indies are doing today, and that is the approach of recording one piece at a time, whether it be here in my home studio, which I've put a lot of work and effort into in both gear, microphones, what you see behind you, like that red panel, or it was going to be going out in the field to a guy's apartment. One bass player, all the tracks will lay down in his Long Beach apartment while he's sat in a sofa. Well, technology today lets us do that because we have powerful interfaces, things that would have cost tens of thousands of dollars 15 years ago that are now $1,000. And we can do so. So the next part was hiring the musicians. I want to let you talk in case you have any questions there so far.
Yeah, a number of things. And thank you for the image, because you went somewhere that I was going to go eventually, and that is, how did you get everybody in the studio? And it sounds like you didn't. And it always intrigues me that produced music has gotten to that point that the musicians might not ever even see each other, as opposed to those, though, as you hear about the albums that, okay, everybody went in the studio, we did, 3 takes, we laid it down live, and that was it, as opposed to something like this. So it's a different way, I guess, of thinking about music than a lot of us imagine from the movies and from TV, where, everybody's in there, drinking beers and throwing things around and destroying the studio.
It is a lot different, and there are pluses and there are minuses to that. Some of that camaraderie is not there. There's certain gel that happens when live players are sitting in a room together. I mean, go watch the documentaries on Netflix, The Wrecking Crew, Muscle Shoals, highly recommended, of how these records that we all grew up with were done. But in today's world, we have to be compromising a little bit. But the magic can still be there, and that's the role of the producer. I produced the record. I engineered the record. Joe is the composer and me as the composer. So we have to bring that spirit, because we are interfacing with all the live players. So we have to bring that spirit to the studio with us. And that is a matter of, sitting down with a vocalist and telling them the story about the song and saying, this is what we're trying to capture, and having them listen and getting them prepared to do the song in a way that they're going to be able to get that vibe that they couldn't get because the cats weren't sitting in the other room, drinking the beers and digging it, So we had to make that happen through personality. I told you about getting musicians that I always wanted to work with. There was a fantastic drummer. His name is Alex Acuna. He played in one of my favorite groups of all time called Weather Report, a very famous group with a bass player named Jaco Pastorius and a keyboard player named Joe Zawinul. These guys were monsters in 1975 of jazz and progressive jazz. The man is 71 years old. And I always wanted to record with Alex. Just loved his playing all my life. He just had a groove that I just loved. And so when I went to do the record, I said, I got to go find out what a gentleman like this cost, because I had no idea. So one of the neatest things about my life, Chuck, is that my mother always told me to ask the prettiest girl in the dance, because sometimes they don't get asked, right? So I typed a letter to Alex, and I just told him the truth. I just said, I'm this retired guy who loves your playing, who's always wanted to play with you. I have no idea if I can afford you. You're in LA. What would you charge us to be this foundation of this house, the drums and percussion, which is what he's known for? And he came back and he said, hey, I'm 71 now. Carding instruments is what's most expensive. If you can come over to my house and do it at my studio and do it with my engineer, here's a price. And he threw a price at me that was a little bit of sticker shock, but very reasonable for a guy like this. And I said, buddy, you're on. And so that was the foundation, right? We prepared those charts and those demos for him. Joe used Sibelius, by the way, is the name of that program, to write out charts. And then we sent Alex all this stuff via Dropbox, right? So getting us back to technology, via Dropbox, we sent him all the information. We show up at his house, and we do all the drum tracks at his house in a 2-day session. And it was wonderful to work with this guy, right? And he lays down the foundation for the record. And then we start getting all of the other players. Some are friends of ours that are close friends. Some of them are from a music program that Joe teaches at. A couple of the young ladies that sing on the album were 18, just out of high school, and they knock it out of the park. He teaches an underprivileged kids program in Santa Ana, California. So all of these players, some do it on the cheap, some do it for beer money, some do it for more. but they all gave it their 100%, and they're all quality musicians. So slowly, we do these sessions. 5 different studios, home studios most of the time, a hotel room for a guy who was a guitar player playing with Gloria Trevi out in on the road, and I Dropbox him stereo tracks. On the hotel room, he does the guitar solos, puts them back in Dropbox. I drop them into Pro Tools, which is eventually where I record all of the real players and mix them, and we're off to the races. And this is how the record slowly gets done over a year period of time to get the musician elements in the way, So another element that is worth mentioning, and that again isn't asking another pretty girl to dance, is that I wanted to be a better mixer for this record. I've mixed all my life in some form or another, but I wanted to be a better mixer. And my favorite artist is Pat Metheny. And so I looked up who was the recording engineer for all of Pat Metheny's records, and Peter Karam kept coming up as the name, which I kind of knew. And so again, I asked another pretty girl to dance. I said, Peter, I don't know what you would charge me to mix this record and master it. This is who I am. This is what we're doing. And so he came back with a price that was too high. So I said, how about this? How much would you charge to mentor me through the process of me mixing this record? And that would just entail me sending you rough mixes along the way, you coming back at me with feedback, and then you could just master the record. And we picked up the phone. He's a Mac user. He's a photographer. We started talking about everything except music. And by the end of the call, he was like, oh, of course I'll do your project. No problem. I'll mentor you right through it. So all along the way, Pete mentored me to become a better mixer. And then I used YouTube, lynda.com. I bought all kinds of plugins. My friend Paul Figiani helped me with, and that's how the record got made. Yeah.
So many things I want to ask about this, Victor. It's you said it took, what, a year and a half to get all this done?
A little less than a year, about 8 months from start to finish of the recording process.
Okay, so your choice of tools. Let's switch to the geeky side for a minute. You
Absolutely.
mentioned Dropbox, obviously. I heard Pro Tools in there. I heard Logic in there. The scoring software that
Sibelius.
Thank you.
Yes.
Are those like conscious choices? Are those default choices because they are the best tools out there or the only tools out there? How did those choices get made?
Okay, let's talk about that. Logic is a great compositional tool. It's got a bunch of these virtual instruments built in. I didn't have to spend a lot of money to get going. Logic was the right choice for that stage of the project, composition, demo. But when it came to recording the musicians and the real mixing, I needed to use the industry standard, which is Avid Pro Tools. That's what everybody's using. That's what the industry knows. That's what Pete uses. And so I had to sign up for an Avid subscription. They do a subscription model. And so I did that. And then along the way, there are a lot of things that are called plugins, kind of like in photography. In photography, we use plugins to make things darker or brighter or to give them sheen. Well, in music, we use plugins to give things colors in our ears. Panning, reverb, which makes the sound more spacey, definition for equalization, compression. All of these things required plugins. Well, there are plenty of manufacturers now who are happy to sell you these plugins, and they are quite expensive. But what they're doing, Chuck, is they're emulating pieces of gear that are simply not available anymore. A compressor that was built in the 70s that if you wanted to buy one used, you'd pay $4,000 for. Well, they have backward engineered that physical piece of hardware to the nth degree. Every circuit, everything, engineered in software. So now you buy that same piece of gear as a plugin for $400, and now I've got the tonal characteristic of that $4,000 compressor on my record. So a lot of that stuff was deployed everywhere in the record.
I don't think we can stress that enough, that while, and at some point we'll talk about the cost of the record, but that you now have the ability to get this stuff, find this stuff, use this stuff, that would be absolutely prohibitive. I mean, with capital P, that there's no way you can undertake a project like this. It just wouldn't be feasible. But now suddenly it becomes feasible, and you've got all that stuff to use for the next project.
That's right. And that was part of the capital investment that I made on this project that I'll be able to use in the next one. I had to buy a very high-end audio interface. What I had for podcasting was fantastic, but it wasn't going to work for recording musicians on the field. And so I had to buy that. I had to buy the latest MacBook Pro 15-inch with all the RAM I could get, because I had to take that on the road along with my Universal Audio Apollo Twin, for those of you who are taking model numbers, little 2-channel unit. That and my Mac Pro and a microphone, this one I'm using right here, I was good to go. That's about a $5,000 investment just in those 3 pieces. But I could record remotely anywhere and get excellent sound quality. And so, yes, a lot of money was spent on the technical side of this in order for next time, I'll have that gear and those plugins available to me. But believe me, plugins are an addictive thing, because like anything else, you go, ooh, that one sounds neat. Let me try it. And then you try it because they give you free trials. And then you're dead because you love the way it sounds on the record and you buy it.
Since you mentioned the people collecting model numbers, what mic are you using?
Right now, this microphone here is an Adobe. Sorry, not an Adobe. It's a Mojave, and it is the LA 301 FET. This microphone I used in almost everything on the record. It's about $1,000 microphone, but it is great for vocals. It is great for guitars. And then I use an MXL microphone, 44A, a ribbon microphone for the horns. $90 microphone, great microphone. Those were the two, an RE20. That was an Electro Voice RE20, which I already had for podcasting. Use that a lot on the trombone and those kinds of instruments. So only about 3 or 4 mics were used in the entire record, because microphones are very, very expensive. But if you can have 1 or 2 really great ones, you can do an entire album with them, with that, no problem, even if there's quality.
That's the first thing you've said that really surprises me, that you just did the album with 3 microphones. It seems like that's such a, first of all, it's a very personal preference to a lot of musicians, but you see the drum kit's mic'd, and you see everything, and you got to have a different mic for the hi-hats as opposed to the kick drums, and it gets a little crazy. So 3 microphones, that's impressive.
Well, let me make a correction there. When we were at Alex's studio for his drum kit and percussion, yes, he had the entire kit mic'd with individual mics, and just the drum and percussion tracks alone were 16 tracks. So remember, if every track is one little instrument, the average track count for the songs on the record are about 70 tracks that I had to mix in. So only 3 mics, but they were used for many different things. And of course, a lot of the instruments are direct input instruments, the guitars, the basses, the synthesizers, those kinds of things.
How do you ever get finished? How do you ever decide that, okay, that's time to leave it? With 70 tracks to tweak it and say, okay, maybe just a little more bass, just a little more this, just a little more of that, or a little less of this and less of that. How do you make that decision?
It is a little bit less. That is the key. Subtractive instead of additive is the key. Less is more. You start with the end in mind. So we had a definite goal, 1st of July. We were going to get this record done in July. And I insisted, that comes from my business background. If you don't have a target, you will never make a target. So that business acumen comes into it. But when you talk about mixing, you just feel it. And what starts to happen is that when you first start mixing, you make really big moves, and the more that you mix the song, and I'm talking about hundreds of times for every song. I sat here at 3 a.m. for days upon days. But you start making little tiny tweaks that make the incredible difference. You take a guitar and you change the panning to go from left and right very slowly as the song moves. And you go, ooh, that's it. And so there just comes this point where you kind of know it. Now, again, because I had Pete Karam coaching me, he was helping me get to that point. He would give me very weird concepts like, I need more of a sonic scape here that moves. That's the kind of advice he'd give me. So then it was up to me to find the tools, whether it's automation, which on the track I could go in and literally with a pencil write volume levels up and down, or moving the soundscape from left to right with panning, or moving it forward and backwards with tools like digital delays or reverbs, which are plugins that emulate soundscapes. They emulate a hall or a room or a cathedral. So every track gets that level of detail. But you listen always to all of it at the same time, because otherwise listening to it isolated is not going to give you a real good idea. And then the huge other thing, if you guys are, anybody out there is just starting to mix, is that you always, always, always listen in mono until almost the very last stage of the process. Because if you listen in stereo, the stereo field can hide things or not have them revealed that are maybe, that should be coming through an art. But if you're in mono, the way we used to listen to radio, then everything is right there in the middle for you. And if you can't hear a guitar in mono, you'll never hear it in stereo. So you mix in mono. When you have a mono mix that you just love, then you hear it on stereo and it goes, wow. And then you make these little tiny tweaks, to make it final. And in this record, there is a lot of sonicscape, what I call sonicscape sound that moves around you and about you. It's one of the things that I made sure that I did a lot of because I love that sound.
Okay, there's something else you've taught me, that you mix in mono. And that really, really surprises me a lot, because I would think that that would be a bigger challenge to achieve the what you say, the moving soundscape, that you wouldn't be able to appreciate it nearly as much in mono.
Right. But if we think about mixing in layers, okay, first thing we want to do is just get overall balances. The bass against the drums, against the guitar, against the vocal. That is all what I would call a horizontal issue, right? So everything is mixed in that way, the blending. It's not until very late in the game when you start getting into things like panning, soundscape, things moving left to right, reverbs. Then, yeah, you are going to be mixing in stereo at that point. But it's very late in the game. Even with that stuff on, it still has to sound great in mono. Why? Because I don't know if you're going to be listening in an iPhone. In an iPhone, if you're listening to the speaker, is mono. And if it doesn't sound good there, then I can't count on you having the same set of speakers that I have. So I would have to do a mix, and I would listen to it in the car, and I would listen to it on an iPod, and I would listen to it on my clock radio, And it was only when I did that, and it sounded fairly good on all of those, because I knew I could get it to sound good in these speakers. These are $1,500 speakers, of course. But so when in your speakers, by the way, you have to have very flat. When you have monitoring speakers, they cannot be colored. Usually when you buy home speakers, they have more bass, or like if you buy Beats headphones, well, they're loaded with bass. When you're mixing at home, everything has to be flat. It can't color the sound at all, because I don't want your version to be colored.
For the model collectors, what reference speakers are you using?
I am using the PreSonus right now, and let me see if I can get you a model number on these. I'm sorry, Chuck.
Oh,
didn't know you were going to ask that question.
It'll just save us both some emails.
For about half the project, I used Rocket 5s, which is our very popular comb level computer speaker, and those are only $300 for the pair. And then when I got to the mixing stage, I really wanted to make sure that I had, something that was a little bit higher level. And speakers, you can go as high as money as you have. It's incredible. Gosh, you know what? I'm going to have to send you an email because I'm just not finding them right now.
That's okay.
I'm sorry about that.
No. It's and I have to tell you, I've had that experience buying for home stereo, not anywhere near what you've done, where you go into an audio store and they have a wall of speakers, and you play a favorite piece of music and then start passing it through the different sets of speakers. It's amazing how much difference it makes. And you really have to do it in a nice quiet room where you can hear the music and where you can do an A/B comparison, because otherwise they all sound good.
They do, and I did find them. They're the PreSonus Scepter S8. That's the pair of speakers that I'm using.
Great. Okay, so at this point now we've hired the musicians, you've recorded everything, you've gotten the mixing done, you've hired your producer, or your mentor, I should say. You're ready to go. Now, at this point you've got it. Now, what's the next step?
Well, we record all the parts, we mix all the parts, we start working on our mixes. And let me just take it to the last part of the process, which are you have to think about what's called mastering. After you have a record completely finished, in order to give it its final equalization so that every song on the record sounds at about the same loudness level, and it sounds at about the same sonic level where it's not too bassy or too trebly. And usually it's always advisable, if you can possibly afford it, that you hire an individual that is not you, that's completely separate from the music to do that phase, because you're too married to it. If I've been listening to these mixes every day, I can't be too, I can separate myself enough. So Pete Karam, who was my mentor, he mastered the record. He mastered a bunch of records. And what he does is he made sure that those little tweaks happened, so in one song that might be lowering the bass, at 400 hertz by 1 dB. They're very small moves, equalization moves up and down, and then loudness, making sure that things were loudness compliant per industry standards so that you're not crushing the music, because this stuff is going to be played on streaming services. And then finally, what Pete does is I send him the metadata for the record. What are the songs, who wrote them, what style, the artwork, which we got from a woman named Nikki Starwalker, and she did the art with a piece of artwork here that you see kind of right there. And then, I had to design this on Photoshop. I'm not a designer, but I had to design it. A friend of mine, Paul, gave me an idea as to a look from the 50s that Joe and I really liked. So we went into Photoshop. We used Nikki's artwork, which we paid a licensing fee for, and got permission to use it, right? You can't just go out and get something. And then, design the back, liner notes, getting something like a barcode so that when you sell it. So all these minutia details to get the record to be published, right? In the old days, musicians didn't have to worry about any of that. But today we do. Thank goodness we have technology. Thank goodness we have the internet. So Pete mixed the record from the mastering perspective, delivered to me the files, which were WAV files, 44.1, 24-bit. That's kind of it's standard for the highest. And then I had to find somebody to distribute the record for me, right? No record company is knocking at my door going, here's a pile of money, Vic. Go for it. Thank you for recording your music. That's awesome. Nope, it's a one-stop shop. Joe and I have to do it all. So technology comes to the aid again. In this case, Service CD, baby, where for a specific service charge, they will let you upload your music and they will sell it for you, at the price that you set, and they will distribute it to all of the streaming services. I mean, all of them, Apple Music, Amazon, everybody's got it now. If you go look for Victor Cajiao or Surrender in one of your services, you can hear this record for free, nothing, just because I like you, And so CD Baby handles all of that end of it for a very small fee, okay? So there's that end of it, and so that's kind of been handled. And then there's the legal end, right? You've got to consider the legal end, because there are 3 factors that you have to consider. There's the factor of performance rights, in case this music ever gets performed anywhere, including playing in the background at a Starbucks, then I need to be paid a penny, maybe less. So in order to do that, I have to go to an organization called ASCAP and join that organization, register all the music with them for performance rights. And then Joe and I individually had to start a music publishing company, because if Santana loves the first song, Surrender, and wants to record it tomorrow, then Joe and I deserve publishing rights because we wrote the music originally. So again, we go to ASCAP and we sign up for their publishing services. We start a publishing company because that way that legal end is covered, And then the last part is the actual physical CD and the downloads also have to be registered and trademarked in a copyright way. So you have to copyright all of the music as a compilation with the Registry of Copyright Office. So all of those legal things also have to get done, even though we may not make a penny on this. Likely we won't make a penny on this. But you still have to do all those things because, hey, what if? What if a song hits? What if something happens? You don't have that stuff covered, somebody can come and take your rights away from you. So all of those things had to be looked at, and they all involve technology. all of them. So if you're an independent artist or musician or whatever and are going to do something, those are all the things that we had to think about and research and listen to podcasts about and do all those things that we love doing in order to get to that place. The last one was one of the songs in our record, the third one, Canto Libre, wasn't written by us. It was written by a dead poet from 1974 named Victor Jara from Chile. He was a martyr in the Chilean War, and he was a poet, and he got killed by the government. And he wrote that song. So I had to research, how do I get him paid? Because we are using his song on our record. So that was a whole adventure, and sure enough, there's a company that'll do that for you. And so you had to determine, well, how many plays do you think this is going to get? Because you have to pay for every single play. So I had to say, okay, we're going to maybe print 1,000 CDs? Nah, but maybe. So I had to pay for that. Maybe it'll get streamed 1,000 times. Don't know. Okay. So then a figure came up. It was about $300 that we had to pay for the right to use his song on our CD legally. Because if I wouldn't have done that and I would have tried to put it up in CD Baby, they would have said, copyright infringement. You can't do it. So if you're a musician, don't think you can do this halfway. You got to also be a business person these days. There is no record company representing us, at least not me. If somebody's listening that has one, I am open to negotiate this album with you. No problem.
Wow.
Yeah.
God, there's so much there.
Sorry.
No, it's
That
I mean,
is a lot.
it's fascinating. So I want to go to the CD Baby thing for just a second.
Sure.
So if I mean, obviously we can all order digital downloads, and I think a lot of us figure that's easy or relatively easy. But to actually get you to ship me a physical copy of the CD, does CD Baby handle that? I know they sell directly through their service, but is this available, let's say, on Amazon or any of the other hard disk services, for lack of a better term?
Yes, it is through CD Baby. One of the things that you can do with CD Baby is you get your physical CD printed up, and then you send them a very small amount of physical units that they will inventory for you, so that if somebody goes there and they want a physical unit, they can do that. And they don't want all your inventory because that costs money to warehouse, so they want like 5 copies. So I'll be getting these off to them next week, and they'll have 5 copies. And of course, if somebody wants one that knows me online or something, contact me. I'll be happy to ship you one out. But there's just the cost of doing this and the return on investment. It's prohibitive. I have one friend of mine that was like, please do this as an LP, as vinyl. Well, it costs $500 to $600 just for the setup to do vinyl. And then it costs about $30 an album, my cost, to print a vinyl album today.
Wow.
Can't do it. I wish, but I can't do it.
Yeah.
Adele can, but I can't. And by the way, the consumer's going to pay $25, for an LP.
Yeah, I haven't looked at the price of a vinyl record in a long time. You could have told me 100 and I wouldn't have been surprised, just because there isn't a demand for them, so you don't have that economy of scale.
Right. Now, what's nice about CD Baby, and I guess I should plug this thing at least once while we're talking, you can get it at surrendermusic2016.com. That'll redirect you to a page where you can sample it, and then you can buy it from CD Baby directly. But if you want, you can also get it from Apple Music. Matter of fact, I think it's cheaper in Apple Music. There you go. You can also listen to it for free in Apple Music, Spotify, Amazon. It's all out there for you to listen. But as an independent artist, support me as an independent artist. I could have done a Patreon for this and seen, let's see what happens. That's a model that we chose not to do. This was about the music, but I would love to make more music. And so in order to do that as an indie artist, I need the support because it's $10. It's 2 cups of coffee. But to me, if I sell X amount of these, then I have enough money to make the next one. So it makes sense.
So at the risk of being crass, and if you don't want to answer this, then they'll never see this question because I'll cut it out.
No problem.
What two questions on cost, if you can, and roughly, what did it cost? Let's see, how am I going to say this? What did it cost in one time this album only cost versus say I think you used the right term, the capital investment cost for things you didn't have. Do you have rough ideas here? Because I think this is really important when we all have discussions about supporting artists, supporting independent artists, what is a fair price to pay for music and all that. A lot of us don't appreciate just everything that you've talked about. Frankly, the $300 rights to the Chilean artist just blew me away. It's like, really? For
Oh, you mean for the one song?
yeah, for one song.
Oh yeah, and actually that's really reasonable. If it took off, it'd be a lot more than that. And then we had to pay for the artist for the artwork. Licensing for the artwork is about $300, a little less than $300.
Right.
So these things add up, right? Because people want to get paid. So yeah, I'm happy to talk about it. I'm happy to be, as a matter of fact, completely transparent, because I think it's a service that people need to hear. Maybe because I'm not this independent artist, but maybe other independent artists that you guys love and that you've heard 1,000 times on a streaming service, but I've never said, wow, I want to buy their song. So it isn't just about buying my song. So let me give you an idea. This record, about $12,000 capital investment, in equipment, plugins, software licensing, speakers, cables, computers, about $12,000. That I'll be able to, get back as I do more projects. And about $12,000 in musicians, other cost, licensing, all of that. So about $24,000 total for this project.
Okay, so like you said, that's a lot of cups of coffee that you have to get somebody to pay you to try to recoup the money, and recognizing that the capital costs you can reuse, but even if you just say, okay, $12,000, that's still a lot of money to recoup for just an independent project where you're not out on the road promoting it, playing gigs, trying to get people to buy it.
It is. And the reality is, again, in the spirit of being completely transparent, record was released July 13th. I've sold 36 copies.
Wow.
So minus the cut that I have to give CD Baby, I haven't played for one plugin yet. Now, I don't say that for a pity party. It's not the idea.
No.
But that's the reality of many, many musicians today. The freedom to be able to do it all yourself, to not have a record company dictating to you how you need to write your music, what you need to do, and this is the length, and this is the instrumentation. That's awesome. I could afford to do some of that because I had a little money put away for this, and my generous wife said, you go do this. Okay? So that's awesome. But I want to do it again. That box of money is gone. So if I want to do it again, I got to be creative in another way. Or I got to say to people, yeah, think about it. Think about supporting not just me, any indie artist. Because people say, I can just stream it for free. I heard it. Thanks. Because everything on the internet is free, right? Everything is free, right? And people say, but Victor, you're getting such great exposure. You know what? I can't send Quicken Loans a check with exposure at the end of the month to pay my mortgage. That's the reality for musicians out there. You can't pay your bills on exposure. And so, again, I don't say that for Victor.
No.
Sure, I'd love to get my money, but it's for every artist that you maybe have thought about supporting and you haven't pressed that buy button. So, yeah, I know it sounds a little preachy, but that's why I wanted to be transparent about the numbers. Because people think, wow, you have a record. How cool.
Yeah.
And it is cool. And the music's awesome. And the 36 people that have bought it have all told me they love it. And that's fulfilling. That's enough artistically. But it's not enough to get the next one made.
Well, and also here, as part of the discussion, I think we need to talk about, because we've talked about this through completely different filters on MacVoices, how to support artists. The merchandise, the T-shirts, you wonder why they charge so much for T-shirts. Well, that's a way for them to make money. Again, for someone like yourself, who you're not going to take this on the road, so you can't get money from playing live shows. So, yes, this presents a whole different challenge for you. And,
right.
and I really admire you for, pardon me, for taking it on.
Well, the good news is that I went into it with my eyes wide open, right? There were no surprises where I said, oh my gosh, what have I gotten myself into? I've mortgaged my home up to the...
Yeah.
None of that happened. I knew exactly what I was getting to it. I mean, I play jazz. You want to talk about an underbought, thing? The best jazz artist you can think of right now only makes a living because they tour 200 to 300 nights a year. The very best one that has a name, not Little Victor. That's because it's jazz. By the way, the only true American music art form that's original. The only one. But it's been forgotten, right? So, yeah, it's a struggle for artists, musicians. And, if we were touring, then I could do some merch and you get it back in some venues and stuff. So, again, I went into it with my eyes open. And I'm not saying any of this for pity party. I'm saying it as an educational tool, that's what it takes to do. You do it for the love of it, and that carries you 95% of the way there. But if I have an opportunity like this one to talk about it, or if you see me tweet something on Twitter about it, I'm not trying to spam you. I promise. I'm just trying to buy the next cup of coffee or the next record. That's all. Yeah.
Wow. I'm kind of blown away by the whole thing. There was a question, though, I want to make sure I get to go back to the production part. Mm-hmm. When you sent him the mixes and he sent you back the mastered mixes, how much of a difference to your ear? And you're the guy that knows it best.
There wasn't a lot. It was, again, more of a consistency thing. All of the files sounded equally loud as I listened to them in the car and in here, and he told me what he did in each one, and there were very tiny moves, a little bit of reduction, mostly reduction, what's called subtractive equalization, on the bass, if it was a little too boomy, or on a vocal, taking out some of the S's that when singers sings, taking out some of that with a plug-in. So very, very little, but having the files done by a professional like that made sure that they would pass the muster when it comes to any of these services. The last thing I want is someone to stream my music and say, "Ooh, that sounds distorted." Nah, that's no bueno. But it's very cheap. I mean, mastering used to cost thousands upon thousands of dollars. Today, you can go to abbeyroadstudios.com and have Abbey Roads master your record for between $80 and $150 a song. So that's where the music industry has gotten. These were services that cost thousands of dollars before. But you can do it. I mean, and that would have been one of my choices. Mastering was the least of my problems. But packaging it up in something called the DPP file, where I could just send that to a CD manufacturer and say, here you go. Here's one file that has everything, all the metadata, the music at 44 116-bit, make the CD, and they can just drop it into their machine and start putting these things out. That's what you pay for when, with a great mastering engineer, you have that quality assurance. Let's put it that way.
Okay, last question.
Sure.
After everything is done and the record is out there and all, what have you learned in the process that you would do differently or do better in the next record? Mm-hmm.
Well, I think what we would do differently is in certain sections we would have the musicians play together. Not all of them, but there would have been a different sense of that, I think, if we would have done it. Specifically, the horn players, trombones, saxophones, clarinets, flutes. There's a certain thing that happens in intonation when those players play in one room and they're listening to each other. That's instantaneous. That because we didn't do that, we had to do some manipulation digitally, for example, but we had the tools to do it. One note on the clarinet is sharp compared to every other note. Well, I can go in with a razor blade. I can highlight that note and say, bring that note up 16 cents in order to get it in pitch. You guys may know that as like auto tune on vocals. You've heard that. Well, this is manual tune. So you can do it, but we would have saved some time and some effort and would have gotten a better blend. The next project we're going to work on, that we want to work on, is something based on a concept called Ensemble 23. That's Joe's concept. It's going to be a 23-piece orchestral ensemble mixing, and it's going to be much more live performance oriented. So that project, if it comes to fruition, will probably be mostly recorded live.
Victor, this has been absolutely fascinating. From the tech standpoint, from the creativity standpoint, and from the business standpoint. I was looking forward to this. I didn't exactly know where we would go with this, and I'm really intrigued. And I think I hope we've given folks a lot to think about when it comes to independent musicians and all the debates about Spotify and royalties. And,
Right.
and one other thing about your situation is you didn't, for better or worse, you didn't have a record company in the middle taking a piece out of out of it. So.
No. What ends up happening with something like that, it's, let's say Spotify. I'll just give you the number because, again, I have no problem with transparency. The record sells for $9.99, and I think that we get, out of download, we get all but 91 cents of that. That's amazing, right? Because if the record were to take off, I could make a bundle. But on the streaming services, it's nothing. I know artists who have millions of plays on streaming services and they get paid pennies. They'll get a check for $3, and they literally have millions of plays. So the streaming services, it is for exposure. But I guess, Chuck, if I want to leave you with something for the people who are out there, that maybe you want to be an artist or maybe you want to be a musician. Today, through technology, through our wonderful Apple equipment here, we have the ability to do all of it. Have a blast like I did. I can't put a value on what I learned in the last 8 months. That has been the wonderful thing to me. I'm geekier than ever on audio stuff. I'm more anal retentive than ever on audio stuff. I know that, and so all of these things that dealt with technology, every day, literally for me in the last 8 months, has been Christmas. I would wake up and I'd be like, I get to play with all these cool toys, and a lot of them I knew about because we already have them and stuff, and a lot of them I didn't. And that's the magic of creativity. That is when, Steve Jobs, talks about the intersection of the liberal arts and technology. That's where the magic is. And that is enabled through these machines that we come to love and sometimes not like and talk about. But these are the machines that are making it possible. This record would have cost $500,000 20 years ago. I kid you not. To use the same type of technology. I kid you not. So I can't wait to see what our kids do.
Wow. I can't even pretend to follow that. I'm just going to ask you, where can folks find you? And I'll get you to give the album URL again.
Sure. I can be found on Twitter at VICTORCAJIAO. Also on Facebook, just look for my name or look up Chuck. He's one of my friends. And then the record, the easiest way is surrendermusic2016.com. That'll redirect you to CD Baby. But if you don't want to deal with CD Baby, then Apple Music, Amazon, Spotify, Tidal, it's everywhere. Just listen to it for free. If you dig it, press the buy button and get a cup of coffee and then listen to it and let me know what you think about it. I love the feedback of hearing if the music touched you. At the end of the day, it either touches you or it doesn't. That's it.
And I will make sure I have links in the show notes to all those places so you just can find Victor, find the music, buy it, enjoy it. Victor, I thank you so much for the time and so much for the insight. Not only was it fun, but you gave us all a lot to think about.
Little different show for you, but I appreciate you taking the time to do it. And I certainly hope it didn't no way came off as a try of self-sell. That's absolutely not what I'm doing.
No, it absolutely did not. It's two friends talking and one being educated by the other.
Yep. If you want to know more about music or any of this stuff, contact me. I love sharing my knowledge. You just let me know.
Great. Victor, thanks. Good to see you. Folks, I'm Chuck Joyner. This is Mac Voices. Go check out Surrender. But almost more importantly, go think about everything Victor said about supporting your favorite artists and independent artists. I know I've learned a few things, and I've got some things to think about. Until the next time, and as always, thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for show notes, links to subscribe, and to connect with Chuck on Twitter, Google+, Facebook, YouTube, Vimeo, SoundCloud, the MacVoices blog, the MacVoices Dispatch, our weekly newsletter, and on MacVoices Magazine, free on Flipboard that helps you do more with your Apple tech. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CashFly at cashfly.com.